Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos Tumas Tzoras, prakim Yud Daled, Tezvav, and Tezayim, actually thus concluding the entire Hilchos Tumas Tzoras, beginning today with Perek Yud Daled. Perek Yud Daled will now begin with all of the laws of Tzoras Habatim. So we're going to learn the basic rules, the minimum size, the various simanim. We're going to learn about what we call sheka arurois. As we'll see, there are a lot of comparisons between nigei batim and the negoim that we learned up until now, as well as you have unique halachas concerning tzoras habatim. Perek Arba Asar has 15 halachas. Let's begin with halacha aleph, says the Rambam. Tzoras habatim, first of all, unlike the shiur that we had by Adam, unlike the shear we had by a beged, is kishmei kirisim, double 2 giris, which is one near the other. Now the Rambam already told us in the beginning that by nigay yodim, right, the beheadus has to be like a giris kilki, and that is 6 hairs by 6 hairs, right, a squared giris. Putting one beside the other, it's not double, it's not 12 by 12 hairs. It's 6 by 12. In other words, we'll keep one side the same. But the arkai double. Where do we get that from? Says the Rambam. Okay, so first of all, the minimum is 2 girisim. Halacha beis. Shloisha simanei tuma yesh babatim. Again, like we had by Begadim, not the way we had it by Adam. We will already call the colors as a siman, as we explained yesterday, because by Adam, just a beheadus, without any of the 3 simanim by Adam, 1 week, 2 weeks max to be quarantined, the person will be sent home tahar. Here, as we'll see, like we learned by Begadim, just a color in itself could lead to a mukhlat. So let's go. Number 1 is mare yerakrak, the green color, as we learned by Begadim. Number 2, adamdam, the very deep red color, as we learned by Begadim. And vahapisayin, and spreading. In other words, mamish like Begadim, and v'kulam mifayrashin b'toyra. Another detail, these 2 discolored appearances of red and green, Kentucky be red and green. It's not one or the other. Shtei hamaris mitztafim zemzem. Weiter. Upisoyin hasamach. If it's going to spread right beyond where it is, then even the minimum amount is called spreading. However, if you have another blemish that is not mamish congruent with, not connected to, but it's someplace else on that house, there a gris will be enough, which is also gavaldik, because when you begin, you have to have kishnei grisim. Once you have the shnei grisim, and you're quarantined for a week, when you come back, if there's even only 1 gris in another location. Aval, however, but if the blemish returns after the house is replastered, as we'll learn in a moment, then it's like beginning from 0, and the only time the shear will be hitting the minimum will be kishnei grisim. Halacha gimel. This concept that it has to appear as if the discolored is deeper, and like the Rambam spoke by Nigei Adam, not physically, just the appearance, that also has to happen over here. And this is called by Batim Sheka Arurois. The Torah uses this word. And this word is a composite of 2 words, which is Shiyiya Shoikin Bakirois. It should appear as if it's sunken into the walls. Weiter. If you have either one or the other, or both together, as long as they have the minimum size, that will lead, number 1, to masgidin, the house will be quarantined, or it can eventually lead to machlitin, to the house being definitely deemed tamei. Ubapisayan, right? If the house increases, we're going to have something which we didn't have until now, and that's called noisin, which means, as we'll get into details, that there'll be times that the entire house has to be torn down. Now, the im pasa acharati, if it spreads after it was replastered, and all the Rambam is just introducing these concepts, we're gonna apply them in a moment. Then noitates, it's called a bais, the entire house is gonna have to be torn down, as we will explain soon. But we're gonna go through this mamish and say that Masuda, like always, step by step. Halacha dalet. So I guess when someone sees a nega in their home, even if the observer, whether it's in his home or someone else's home, is a chacham, and he knows from knowing these halachas that this vada is a nega, the way you speak is extremely important. Don't go ahead and already paskin by yourself by saying nega nirali babayis. Don't use those words to the kohen. That a nega means it is a definitely nega. Ella, go and tell the kohen kin nega nirali babayis. In other words, the psak din has to come from the kohen. You don't be the poisik. On top of that, we have to speak positively, which is mamash gewalt. Then the Rambam is quoting what it says in the Chumash, "V'tziva hakoyin ufino asabayis." Kohen will command for everything to be removed from the house prior to him paskening that the house is a house that has tzoras, and because, as we'll see, once the house is a house with tzoras, everything in it becomes tummy. And we want to hatoyre chasa al mamoinim shal Yisrael. And what is removed? Afilu chavile eitzim, afilu chavile konim. In other words, bundles of wood, bundles of reed that have very little value are also removed. And then v'yira haneg. Halacha hey, bayis ofeu. Ein poischon loy chaloinos lidus nigoy. In other words, if he walks into a house and there's not enough sunlight to properly see what that color looks like, and the option would be you have windows that are shuttered closed, the kohen doesn't have to open them up. Not only that, he shouldn't go into the house the way the house is right now. Ella im ein haneda nida boy in the state that it's in, then it's start. Another rule. After he looks, he doesn't paskin when he's in it. He also doesn't want to become tamei. Yetzik, the kohen goes up. The yamin of Pesach Habayis, and he stands near the entrance where Betzada Mashkef, right near the Mashkef, right beyond, outside of the Mashkef. Either he's going to paskin that Yaskid, the house is quarantined, or he's going to paskin that this house is muchlat, for sure, confirmed, or it'll be plated. All of that is when he's standing chutz labayis, Betzada Mashkef. Shenemer, as it says, v'yotza hakoyim in abayis, El Pesach Habayis. El Pesach Habayis means he doesn't go back to his base HaMedrash, and from there, v'hizkeres Habayis. In other words, whether it's his own house or whether the kohen is looking at some other bayis hamenuga, he shouldn't even say it when he's under the mashkoif. He only says it when he's bitzad pischoi, right immediately, but outside the area of the mashkoif. Now, v'im amatachas mashkoif. But if he did not follow what the Torah says, and he stood too close, he stood under the mashkoif, or he went too far, he went back to his house, and he paskin from there, but his psak will still stand. If he says v'hiskid, harei muska. Allah other qualifications to define a house. The house has to have at least arba amis, or more. Another essential criteria, it has to be a house that has 4 walls. And we'll see, to the exclusion of a house with 5 walls, and a avada with 3. And look at this detail, it has to be built ba'aretz, on the ground. We'll see soon about second stories in a moment, and made with avanim, stones, afar, earth, and wood. And as it says, right, the pasuk in Mitzvah, es avanav, the es eitzav, the eis kol afar habois. It has to have all of these 3 in its building materials. If it was less than 4 by 4, or if it was larger but it wasn't like a square, it was a circle. Even though many times you square it. but not over here. Or if it had 3 walls, humongous with 3 walls. Or 5 walls, avada or more. So the exclusion, first of all, of ba'aretz means not a boathouse. Now here it gets a little bit interesting. So when you read a house that's totally, right, it's suspended on 4 beams. So just to point out that the Rambam in the Perish HaMishnayos, he's speaking about not second story, but there is a building, and you have from the building beams that are protruding horizontally, and on top of that, they built a house. In other words, there's like nothing underneath it. That's what the Rambam means. In that case, einay metame bin goyim. However, hoyu banui al arba amudim, then yes, metame bin goyim. What does that mean? So for those of us who are using a chayenu, let's read again. He's quoting in the bottom in footnote 3 what the Rambam himself writes on the Mishnah Perish HaMishnayos. The Rambam Dafke does not interpret this part of halacha, the end of halacha, to have a house like here in Pico Roberts and some second stories that just built on pillars for the parking. That's not what the Rambam meant. Let me read what he did mean. He's speaking about, but the 4 pillars implanted into the earth with the roof built over them. The Rambam means at the end of Allah Chavav that you don't actually have physical walls. It's a box. You have pillars that are supporting the covering, and you are living underneath it. That's how he entices it over there. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Halacha Zayin. Another minimum essential condition, and if it's less than that, it's not shaykh to the dinam of Tzuras Habatim. Ein pachos mishmainam. There has to be at least 8 stones. Dafke 2 for each wall. Why? Now, we began this Perek by saying Tzuras Habatim is only if it has the amount of Shnei Kirizim. Now we're going to learn another very important detail. But not on the same stone. On each stone, there has to be 1 Gris. Al Shtei Avadim. And that says, Al Ha'avanim, plural, Asher Bohen, Hanega. In other words, the nega is appearing on the stones. And we want for each wall to be able to have on it the nega. If it has to be on 2 stones, you have to have a minimum of it. So the amount of wood that carpenters put holding up the mashkoif, holding up the lintel. Now, not lav dafka, the wood that's needed for the lintel to rest upon, but the wood was always used to make sure that when the door is closing, the door should stop at some point. Right? I know today you have hinges, it's a whole different story. That amount of wood is the minimum amount of wood that the house has to have. And how much offer does the house have to have? So if you have 1 stone, that's the way they connected it. They used earth. Enough earth to connect 1 stone to the other. Again, bricks or marble are not considered avanim. If one of its walls is only mechupa, means even if there's a stone underneath it, or the minimum 2 stones, but if it's going to be coated with marble, the echad bisela. Now there's another girsa that has here not the echad ba'avanim, but the echad bilevenim. That makes more sense. The echad ba'afar, but you don't have 4 walls in which there are at least 2 stones that are exposed when you're standing inside the house. Halacha 9. And prior to meeting all of the essential requirements, a nega appeared, and then later you added to your house. You brought avanim, or the eitzim, or the offer, or all 3, and now the house does meet the minimum requirement. Eloma, the nega is already there. The house remains starred. By the way, we had it by the beged. If you remember yesterday, that the beged is the minimum 3 by 3 thumb breadths. If a nega appeared on the beged prior to having the minimum size, and then you kept on weaving, it's going to remain tahor. There's going to be many similarities. Halacha Yud. Bayish says if a house was covered with a plant, in other words, the plant became its roof. So bitlan means that you consider the zroyim part of the building. Hoil umishamshin tashmish eitz. They are viewed as eitz. Now, what's the chiddush? Ve'im nitma habayis nitmu imay tuma chamura k'may she'yisbar. And we don't consider that to be something separated from, but this is house. It became the roof of the house. Allah Yudal. Yerushalayim v'chutz la'aretz, either the holy city of Yerushalayim or Mamash Lahavdil, a complete chutz la'aretz, ein mitamim b'negoyim, nothing there, no houses there are susceptible to tumas tzoras habayis. Shenemar, as it says, bebeis eretz achuzaschem. So an aleph tarava, that means the holy land, which was given to the Yidden as a achuzah, but it also excludes Yerushalayim, because Yerushalayim when is chalka l'shvatim. So we have a big machlokes throughout, and that's the Rambam is consistent. He always paskins that way. It doesn't mean that from the beginning Yerushalayim was not divided, but as the Gemara tells us that from when it became clear that Yerushalayim is going to be our capital city, so it no longer belongs to the Shvatim. Right, even though we want to write the Yehuda and Binyamin and the Makam HaMikdash, but all of that doesn't contradict that. And therefore, all of the halachas that we just learned not that long ago, right, by Elias Saregel, how you can't charge rent because you don't really own it, but you should tip the balabayas with the hides of the karbanis. Another din, even in Eretz Yisrael proper, Batei HaGoyim Shav Eretz Yisrael, ein b'tamim b'negoyim. Mamish, like we learned yesterday by Begodim. Another correlation, halacha yud beis. If a person buys a house from a goy, even if that house already had a nega, we don't say since it appeared when it belonged to a goy, it's no longer significant. No, now yeira batchila, give it its initial inspection. Again, like a beged, we learned the same thing. That if a beged belonged to a goy, it's not subject to b'tzoras begodim, and then a yid buys it, you don't discount that. Even though it's there for a long time, you don't say, it's already here for 2 weeks. It's as if you just saw it, but it is going to be something that has to be addressed. Halacha Yud Gimel, let's go more. If you have a Union Street buildings, in other words, you have ghetto buildings, which means there's no space in between the buildings. So there's a house and a house with a common wall. One side is a goy, one side is a yid. Or a house that's built mamish on the boundary between the Holy Land and Chutz La'aretz. And here we say that it's b'chlal not subject to negoyim, even the side that belongs to the yid, even the house that's inside the Holy Land. Now, I want to make it clear that when you have a wall in between the house of two Jews, that will be different. We'll learn that in the next chapter. But here it's either goy and a yid or chutz la'aretz and aretz. Now that we gave you all of the cases that are excluded from, all other cases, yes, mitamim are subject to acquire tumas negoyim. Bein sevuyim b'dei adam. Now let's go into a detail. By big godim, we learned it has to be white. By batim, I don't care what colors the stones have, and I don't care whether they were colored b'dei adam, they were painted, or they were just naturally colored. Regardless, they are all subject. And that's, so Danny said yesterday, because if the beged is not white, you can't discern the color. Clearly, you see, it's not the case, right? If you know that, even though the stone is chveis, whatever the color is, if you have that shimush, that experience to notice this color is considered deep green or deep red, yes, it's a problem. Halacha Yudalit, Beis Ha'isha, house that belongs exclusively to a woman, a house that belongs to partners, house, a Beis HaKnesses or a Beis HaMedrash that has in it a living chamber, which was common. There was a dira to the chazan or for a talmud. All of them are considered the house, and yes, mitamim banagoyim. And the final halacha of this chapter, halacha tezvav, kirois ha'evois. So there were certain feeding stalls that were very large, right? And you have, big partitions. Or v'kirois hamachitza shavabais. If you have a partition in a house, in other words, it's a wall that's separating one room from the other. which was a big thing then. The whole house used to be one room. They are not metamim b'negoyim. No, it's only the walls that are the outer walls of the house. They are the only walls that are subject to tumas negoyim. Gewaldig. And now moving on to Perek Chamisha Asar, the 15th chapter, the second to last chapter, we're going to learn many more details of Tzoras Habatim. Just to speak out here in the intro, one unique halacha. Until here, we learned about sometimes if it's not already mukhlat, it's going to be musgar, either for 2 weeks or only for 1 week. Now we're going to introduce the possibility of by houses only that it can become on the status of only quarantined for 3 weeks. Now, by the way, 3 weeks is, as we learned a few days ago, it's not 2 weeks is not 14 days because the 7th day is the 7th day to the first week. It's already day number 1 for the second week. The end of the second week is on day 13. Using that same logic, which we do here by Batim, unique, there's a concept of 3 weeks of Musgar. So when is the end of the third week? By 3 times, it's not 3 times 7. Day 19 will be already the end of the third week, right? Because if day 13 is day 13 and it's day number 1, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and many other Gavaldik Pratim about the taking off the stones, about the scraping the mortar, about the replastering. Let's go. Perek Chamisha Asar has 8 halachas. Halacha Nigei Batim. Here we have the unique halacha. Yesh b'hem hesker shloisha shavuos. There's a possibility at times for the house to be in the status of musgar, not for 1 week, not for 2 weeks, but even for 3 weeks. And that means clearly that's 19 days max. Why is it 19 days? Who taught you math? Yeah, because the 7th day of the first week and of the second week is Oilalakan Ulakan, which means those up. So 13 to 19 is 7 days. Nimt says Atolamed Kumtais. That's in Yiddish. That if there is the scenario that we'll explain soon, where it has to be seen for a total of 3 weeks, the kohen will see it only on the 7th day. As we learned above, it's not like throughout the week of quarantine, whenever you want, you show it to the kohen. Dafka on the 7th day. And then it'll be Yom Shleisha Asan, and then it'll be Yom Tisha Asan. The Hezker Batum Shleisha Shavua is this concept, this rule, that there's a possibility of 3 weeks of Hezker is not written in the Torah. B'chlal, the Torah writes explicitly many of these halachas. So by Nigei Adam, the Torah writes, go to the first week to the Kohen, go to the second week to the Kohen. That's befetish. By Batim, no. And the Rambam writes a rule that, interestingly, unlike Nigei Begadim and unlike Nigei Adam, Roiv Dine Nigei Batim are not written in the Torah. And they are only Divrei Kabbalah. Not only, God forbid, in the negative, but just to be aware, they are all passed down by oral tradition. Right? Shmulif, Chamisha Asar, base. Now, putting everything together, that which is written, that which is oral. Now we're going to go through the Seder of all the different possibilities. We already learned in the previous chapter about the 3 simanim, right? Yirakrak, Adamdam, and Pisoyim. Now let's apply this. When the kohen comes, the Yirah HaNega, and he sees that there is a nega, and it's shoikeya, right? Sheka arurois. That means it's not just about the color, but somehow it looks like it's sunken in, it's deeper. And that color is either yirakrak or adamdam or both. As we learned in the minimum amount of two grisin, they are on 2 stones. That's not enough to make it mukhla. Now, yaskir shivas yom. Furthermore, again, more correlations between Beged and Adam, that even if when the kohen came to make their initial inspection, the whole house, all of the stones of the house were already yirakrak or adamdam, also yaskir. Remember? No, it's this din that hafach, kulay, love, and toir is only if hafach. If lechatchila it's all discolored, like by Adam and like by a beged, you're still going to be musk. Now, what comes? Let's go right. Now comes the 7th day. On the 7th day, the kohen returns. If those colors are still there, but they became dimmer, they faded at least a bit, and the kohen is noticing that. No need to say that if these colors completely went away, you're not good yet. Now listen to this, guys. You have to scrape the place of the nega. You have to remove that. And Baba is taught. If it stayed, it held ground, Not it spread, not it got dimmer, not it got smaller. It's exactly the same. Maske Shavua Sheni, then you go into the second week of quarantine. And at the end is again on the 13th day. And here again, if it got Kohanega or Avada, if it completely left, as he did on day 7, same rule will be on day 13. Koilef Makim Hanega K'dei Klipa, he removes the outer area upon which there used to be a nega or there was the deeper nega, but now you're not good to go because now the fact that you were 2 weeks in quarantine, it's worse. Now you're going to need to use the birds to be matired the house. You know, it's everything that we learned, my friends, in Perek Yud Aleph is going to have to be done over here. The only thing that the Rambam is going to have to, and he will define later, is that when you are using the ceremony of the 2 birds, I get the 2 birds, they have to be ideally equal, and you have to have also the 8 tzeres. But the one thing that you don't, by the Betzoida, we learned that it's sprinkled 7 times al achar yodoi, on the backside of his hand. We're going to see soon how many times and where in the house it's sprinkled. The Rambam doesn't speak about it right now. Now, just for the picture that Kevin put is called mold. And mold is not soras. It's only going to kill you, but it's not soras, something else. Now, if it actually spread, amazing. In other words, if it got better, you still got a problem. Not only do you have to peel it, but you have to be matired the house. That's if it got better. If it stayed the same, I'm sorry. If it spread, or if it stayed the same, wow. Then now we're beginning with new details. You have to actually remove those stones, not peeling the outer part of it. And not only do you remove the stones, but now there's also some peeling done. And that's called umakze es ha'afer al michutz le'ir. You have to scrape off all of the, we would call cement, all of the mortar that was holding the stone connected to the adjacent stone. All of that is also removed from the house, and it's taken out of the whole city. Now you got yourself a hole in the wall. Now you got to fix your house. So that's the meaning of the words now. B'toch es habayis. Now you got to replaster. Guys, that you have to replace the stone. This goes without saying. You're going to replace the stone, Shmuli, and now you're going to replaster the whole house. This is mamash godly. Not only that area. And now that's the case where you go into a 3rd week of Hesked. Even though there was Pisoyin, it's amazing. Even though it stayed the same, by Beged we learned it stayed the same, it's Mukhla. No, here there's still another. Now on the 19th day, that means at the end of the halachic 3rd week, kind of seeing the house the 3rd time. Now don't forget, he removed the stones and he replastered the house. So if the nega returned, that's what the Torah is speaking about. Now appreciate this spreading doesn't mean what spreading meant until now, because until now, Shmuli, spreading means you have the original and it spread. That's the way people understand in English. Here, you removed the stones. You replastered the house. Here, even though it didn't return bigger, if it returned to the minimum size, that's also called spreading, because that's called spreading, because you removed it and it came back. So now with noitates, it's called a bais. Now you have to destroy the whole house. But if it did not return, or it did not return, meaning the halachic returning, it's not to gerisim, then, as we learned in the end of the first Hesked, now mitare b'tziparim. It's the 2nd time you have to use the birds for the house. Prior to the Taras HaTziparim, that means a year later. So the nega did not return on day 19. Doesn't matter. If you did not use the Taras HaTziparim, whenever it comes back, you're stuck in that area. Now you have to destroy the house. But once you sprinkled the water and from the blood, with all of the details again that we learned in Perek Yud Aleph, now you begin again. Now you're abat chila. Furthermore, in pasanegam, guys, this halacha basis gavaldik. I like all of the scenarios. In pasanegam, if it spread right away, it came back and it spread. So here also you have this concept of removing the stones. And not only you have to remove the stones completely, it's not just scraping them away, but you have to remove all of the mortar that was connecting the stone and its adjacent stones. That's called the koitze ha'afa. And where do you remove it to? Not just out of the house, but out of the city. And here again, not only are you going to fill up those gaps with stones again, but you're going to have to replaster not only that area, but all of the house. And now at the end of the day 13, if it returns, again, even though it returned in the same size, it's called spreading. Because when you removed it and it came back, that's spreading. The moment you have fisoyoin achrei hitoyach, that's the rule. Like, it's simple. When is there the din of destroying the house? Answer is fisoyoin achrei hitoyach. Now, let's call abayis. And here again, even though you should use the tziparim immediately, if you didn't do the tziparim, and 2 years later the nega comes back, that's called pisoyan achrei hitoyach. I don't care if it wasn't on the day of the examination. And then you'll have to be noitates et sabayis. But here again, consistent. But if you did this, the avoida, the word avoid is wrong. If you use the siparim, then you ended this whole saras parsha. If it comes again, it's not called spreading; it's called brand new. Is it about chilom? When we speak about removing the stones, there's never going to be a removal less than 2 stones. Of course, you know why? Because the minimum nega is 2 grisim, 1 on each stone. Those stones have to be removed entirely. When you remove them, it's not shot that you're going to just switch their positions. No, when you replace them, you bring brand new stones. Also, when you remove the afar, you're scraping all of these materials. Because whatever is removed has to be taken out entirely. New materials have to be brought. And then you should plaster as habayis. Another detail about the plastering proper, the einotach basid, which was a common way for them to plaster, right? Sid. Ella ba'afar. Afar means mortar. As it says, another maybe even achas tachash shtayim shechalats. When you are replacing them, if it was 2, you can't replace it with 1 large one. Or if there was 1 large one, one of the 2 that you removed, you cannot replace it with 2 smaller ones. That's the way it has to be. Now, by the way, the Rambam is only speaking about the minimum, which means if it appeared 3 gerissim on 3 stones, you got to remove the 3. Same idea, then replace it with 3. Yesh le'lahavi shtayim. Oh, I take back. But if you remove 3 gavaldik, then you can replace it with 2. In other words, the minimum is 2, but it doesn't have to be 1 for 1. It does not need to be 1 for 1.
Right, when the house is destroyed, the entire house has to be moved outside the city?
Yes, we're gonna get there. Yes. So yeah, we learned in Perek Yud Daled, you're sharing a wall with a guy. Remember that? And then we said that house is not subject altogether. Here in this chapter, in Perek Tezvav, the Rambam is speaking about you have a neighbor, a Yid, and both houses are in Eretz Yisrael. Neither are in Yerushalayim or HaKodesh. Elamai, the question is, in the case where inside your house, someone's house, Reuven's house, the blemishes appear. So when you have to, in the cases where you have to be choylitz as havanim, shneim cholzim. In other words, it has to be through and through. You don't say, sometimes the walls are thick, right? So you can have like many layers of stones. You gotta, that area has to be removed. And ushneim koitzim es ha'afar, they both are obligated to scrape away again all of the mortar that was connecting these stones that you removed to all of the adjacent stones. However, you know, up until now, everything that we said, the Torah always uses a lashon abim. But now bringing afar is done only by the one in whose house this appeared. As it says, v'afar acher yikach, not yikchu. And again, v'tach, not v'tachu. In other words, ein chaveroi metapel imoi baticha. Masha'en came prior to the ticha, even though it appeared in Reuven's house, Shimon is going to be participating in the work and in the expense.
Is he banned from helping, or if the neighbor wants,
It's not about the word helping, it's about out of pocket.
out of money.
Yeah. Halacha, hey. Now, Evan Shabazavi is, if you have a stone, and actually over there in the Mishnah, it's clear, we're speaking about a stone it's one part of it is an Abayis Hamenuga, and this stone, Rabbi Yaakov, goes into a neighboring house. Now, Bisman Shu Chayletz, whenever you have to remove it, you have to remove all of it. In other words, you have to also remove the part of the stone that's serving the neighbor. Ubisman Shu Noitates, whenever there's the scenario, as we learned in Halacha Beis, right, when there's going to be a Pisoyan after the Hitoyach, and then automatically you activate the din of destroying the house. So here you don't destroy the neighbor's house. It's not good for the neighbor. It's when you have to remove the stone, you got to remove it, even the part that's in the neighbor's house. But whenever you have to now destroy the house, only your house. In other words, the Evan, as we learned by a Beged and by Yadam, as we'll learn now, the unique Tuma, it's similar to Tuma soil. So if some item, person, stone that has tzoras on it enters another home, it brings Tuma into it. So here's the question. You understand? Do we say that, I know that you don't have to destroy the neighbor's house, but the Evan, while the Evan was there, the Evan was protruding into the neighbor's house. So will it bring all of the dinim that all of the Adam and the Kalim there are atomic? That's a doubt. Halacha. And when you have a second story, no, you don't have to destroy the upper story. Question is, how much of your ceiling is yours? And above that, maybe we'll say, that's already the floor of the guys on the top. So the beams, which is the ikir, because under the beams, they would put the plaster. Over the beams, they would put a floor. The beams themselves, we are allowed to say, the klaidas, they belong to the aliyah, which is amachaya. They don't have to be destroyed. And not only that, in the other direction, if it appeared on the second story, and lahoir, that's the way we were quoting here, the Chayena brought from Rambam Perush HaMishnayos in the previous chapter regarding ba'aretz. In other words, we made it clear that when we speak about a house that's not subject to Tumas Soras, because it's not ba'aretz, the example we gave was, you have one house, and you have beams that are going out horizontally, and on top of that you build a house. That house is not ba'aretz. But if you have a normal 2, 3, 4 story building and it's all on the ground, that's all ba'aretz. So therefore, if nira ba'aliyah, and yes, the aliyah has to be destroyed, you don't have to remove the beams which are in between the top floor and the bottom floor. Which in other words, there's a big leniency. Is the koidos the bottom floor or the top floor, wherever it's more advantageous and not losing it. But if you don't have a second story, now you have to destroy the house. You got to destroy all of it. Avanov, the Eitzav, the Afarai, everything that was made into the ceiling and roof, nitatzim imoi. But umatzil, what you could save is hamalbenin, the esrige chaloinois. So if you had on the roof, on top of the roof, you had a fence, but that's not the house. If you had in the windows, they would have certain nets, even then, to make sure kids don't fall out. All of that, that's going to be saved. Other than that, you can't save any part of the ceiling proper, including the kodesh, because you can't give it to the top floor if there's no top floor. Halacha zay. Halakei chavana mibayis musgar. Ubana oisem abayis tahor. Here's your question. Here's your answer to your question, Shmuli. So what do you do with these stones? So one second, a house was musgar. Not a house whose stones needed to be removed. A house was musgar, and someone removed some stones and they built it into another house. Now like this, if the house from where you removed it now has an issue, in other words, we say that the stones that you removed from a bias musgar is always going to be considered part of the house from where it came from. How great is that? And if that house now has to be destroyed, these stones have to be removed. Now,
who pays for that?
What's the question?
The second house is not the first house, but the guy, those first damaged stones were given to the second guy.
Yeah. So l'chayra, if the chacham, the guy that bought the stones, was not informed that they came from a bayis musgar, l'chayra, the owner that sold it to him has to give him back the money. Okay. Now nira nega al ho'avanim shabana in the different direction. That Reuven and Shimon, the stones came from the house of Reuven. Guys, we're not speaking about a house that was already designated to be noited, that you have to destroy those stones. All right, you can't use them. The bais was only musgar. Stones was removed from Reuven's bais musgar, and they were built into the house of Shimon. Now the nega appears on the stones while it's in the house of Shimon. Hamuzgar yinatzes. Amazing. Again, consistent. We consider these stones still to be connected to the house of Reuven. Fact that it was built into another house, we don't care. Now that they reappeared, what did we learn? We learned that whenever the blemish reappears, you got to destroy the house. You got to destroy the original house. Wow.
The original house.
Yes.
Wow.
And not only that, let me go more. Habayis hasheni masgidenoisem benegazeh. It's like kareach mekan v'kareach mekan. We also say, Shimon's house for the first time has an egg appearing in it. Kedin kol bayish shenira v'nega batchila. In other words, here we're very machmir. The beams are very mako. These stones, we say it belongs to the original house, but it's also in this house. And final halacha ches says that Rambam keitzad mitaran asabayis hamanuga. Now, the Rambam said the words in this chapter. You bring the tutsi pada, but what, like we mentioned, you can't just leave it at that because details that we learned yesterday concerning nigei begadim are not shayich over here. Okay, so what do? Like we said, you put it on the hand, or by Adam, you put it on the hand of the mitayr. There's no hands here. Maybe Maim Chaim should be klicheres. Lohoir, the Rambam doesn't write, it has to be klicheres chadoshim. Now, does that mean that it doesn't have to be? It could be. Because if the Rambam is going in through the details, or the Rambam is just making a quick recap, and he's expecting for us to bring forward all of the other details that he doesn't mention, I don't know. Shteitzi parim, chayre has to be brand new. All these days. The tutsi parim we learned lachatchila, they have to be shavin, mamish like the two seirim of Yom Kippur. It's an interesting correlation. Right, the two seirim of Yom Kippur, also, right, one is La Hashem and one is La Azazel. Here also, one is going to be La Hashem, so to say, you're going to shecht it, one will be sent away. Interesting. And they have to be lachatchila the same appearance, same value. Anyways, the Rambam doesn't write these details. L'chayra they apply here, and you bring the 8 eres. Yeah, it's also the minimum of we learned an amo, and the ezoid we learned yesterday. All of the pratim. So pratim is not repeating. Ushni toilas. He writes ketaharas adam shabianu l'chol davar. That's the l'chol davar. All the details apply over here. So why is the Rambam repeating it? I'll tell you why. Because this is something that we have to clarify. Adam. If the Adam is needing the two tziparim, Maza Sheva Pa'amim, La'achar Yodishom Etzoiram. That's by Adam. Now by Abayis, Ubabayis Maza, yes, Sheva Pa'amim, but we're Al Hamashkoif Shel Bayis on the outer part of the lintel of the house. That's it. That's what you have to say. 7 times on the Mashkoif. Usha'ar kol ha'maisim shavim, but everything else is exactly the same. And now, my friends, Pevek Tazayin, which is the final chapter of Tumas Sodas. Now, what is left? See, the Rambam is the same Seder. What level of Tuma does a house Hamanuga have? How is it Metama? We're going to learn again, like we mentioned, that there's this unique Chumrah that a part of that house is that enters another house is matame. If a person enters the house, he's tame. But here we're going to learn a very interesting nuance, and that is, if a person enters the house, or if a keli is brought into this house, miyad, they become tame. But a person that's wearing garments, a person that's wearing shoes, or you have a ring on your finger, and you enter the house, even though the person becomes tummy immediately, there's going to be an interesting minimum amount of time needed in order for the kalim on you to become tummy. And if you entered and exited, you'll be tummy, and your begadim won't be tummy as long as it's being worn on you. Gavaldik. And at the end of this chapter, the Rambam is going to have a very long halacha. Right, there are 10 halachas, but the 10th halacha is long. The Rambam is going to give what people call conclusionary words. It's like asiyum. The Rambam is going to give words of musar. The Rambam is going to give words of inspiration, all from these amazing halachas of Tzoras, Perik Shisha Asar, as 10 halachas. Let's begin with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Bayis hamenuga. And bayis hamenuga, whether it's musgar or muchlat, we will learn in this chapter some differences between musgar or muchlat, but generally they're the same as we learned by begadim and as we learned by yadam. What level of tumah is it? Avas hatumas. What does that mean? Kol hanugeya boy nitma. Now this is very unusual. Why is it very unusual? You know what the general rule is? If something is mechubar lakarka, it's not susceptible to becoming tummy. Well, that's the whole point of tzoras habatim. The bias is tummy. You touch it in the inside, you touch it in the outside. Touching it in the inside, when inside, there's another reason why you're tummy. But even if you touched it from the outside, moment you have the din of removing the stones, whether it is you only scrape them away, or you have to remove them. No, okay, removing the stones, not scraping. Removing the stones, or the avanim and the eitzim and the offer of the house when you have to demolish it, in the cases that we learned in the previous chapter, all of them, not as they are house, they are the remnants. They are also avos hatumos. Now, how much of it is needed to impart tumah? Look at these halachas. A kazayis. It's such a good trick, like we had yesterday. A kazayis, God. Yeah. The whole kazayis mehen mitame adam v'kelim. How? Maga, even masa without direct contact, and even babiyah. That means if the house was demolished, or the stones were removed, and someone took a kazayis of that stone and brought it into another house, all of the men and kalim in that house becomes tummy. Ketzad im nichnas kazayis mehen labayis tor nitma kol asher babayis may adam v'kelim. Guys, it goes without saying oichlin and mashkin. Avadev to oichlin were muksha. Shekulam mitramim babiyah ka adam mitzayda. And another detail, what do you do with them? Shmuli, they're asr b'hana. It's not just a din of tumah. There's a isur hana and they're metame. Now, what happens? Im sar from Basmam Sid, if you burn these items and you transform them into lime, sometimes you say, well, it's, panam chadash is volakan. We don't say it over here. Hareza asr b'hana. Wow. You cannot take away it by transforming it. Shenema, because it says Sora'as mam eres. Guys, the word mam eres is from the word cursed. But it's such cursed. Yes, cursed means you can't get rid of it. Taim by me'era. Understand that there's a curse in it. Va'al teihana boy. V'chulam mishal chanoisim chutz la'ir. All of these items, whether it is only the stones, whether it is when you demolish a house, all of the destroyed material, they have to be removed from the city. And like by Beged, what did we learn by Beged? That the Michutz La'ir is not only by a walled city. By Adam, we learned it's only from a walled city. Here also, like a Beged, more Chamur, not like Adam, the Avanim, and all of the other materials have to be removed from your city, from the city. Halacha Beis.
The area where these stones are moved to, wherever that is.
Yeah.
Does it ever lose its Tamea?
No.
So
well, you bury them. You'll bury them. No? Yeah.
You could have an area in Eretz Yisrael right now with full of stones that you wouldn't know that it's Tamea.
If you don't know, you don't know. But I'm sure they would. You guys, it's not matama but oil. Let me see. If it's buried in the ground, how can it impart tumah? You're not touching it. You're not carrying it, and it's not entering a home.
Get in the ground.
They would do that.
Picks it up by accident over decades later or whatever it is.
All of these accidents, and it's an accident. L'chaim, halacha beis. Bayis musgar. So when we mentioned, remember Bayis hamanuga. Bayis hamanuga is a generic word, but now let's start breaking it down. When it's matama b'maga, another thing, Avremel, the house, while it's a house, is tamei and it's matame. But now we make a difference. If it's only musgar, then einoi matame ela mitoichay. Shenemar v'habo ela bayis kol yemei hizkir oise yitma da'arav. Houses, takan av, you become tamei an erishain, tumas erev. Abol hamuchlat. If the house was as we learned in Perek Tezvav, then not only is it mitame mitoichai, but also uma'achoirav. Ma'achoirav doesn't mean bia. You can't be bia ma'achoirav. Bia means touching it. You touch the walls of the house. Shahanegeya boy ma'achoirav tamei. Shanamar, as it says, tzoras again mam eres afar sholtinem tzoras babayis tamei hu. Now the question is, this pasuk is in the context the house was already musgar. If it's already tummy when it's muskar, which it is, so why does the Torah have to say that now that it became muchlat, now it's tummy? That's a source that it was tummy before, but there has to be more ability to impart tumah, and that's the additional ability. Meaning, before take it was matame. Now it was matame because bia. Theoretically, even if you would not have tumas bia, it would be matame because you touched it from the inside. Now it's matame from the outside. Shekul tame and the tame ma'achaydov. Stones from a bais musgar, not house. Stones that were removed, they also impart tuma me'achaydayim. We don't say only from the inside. Masha Enkin, when it's connected to the bias and it's only musgar, that's where it's not matama from the outer part. Halachigim. Echad ha-musgar va-muchlat. This unique tumas bia, other than touch, they're both the same. No, when you enter a house, whether it's only musgar or muchlat, matama babia. Ketsa. Bias. Shohaya mesach al bias minuga. One house is built over, amazing. So in other words, the lintel from Reuven's house is over the house of Shimon. Shimon is the house that's musgar. Musgar. Rambam is just trying, is really addressing a question. Like, why are you telling me that it's matama b'biyah? So he's giving an example that you have one house and the other house. Like, you imagine there's a tree over a bayis musgar. Means even though you didn't enter the house. The bayis achitzin has no nega in it. But nevertheless, then there was one part of the bayis achitzin, even only the mashkoich, that's over the bayis hamenuga. The bayis hamenuga is not yet muchlar, it's only muskar, still tamei. Sharehu v'habayis hatamei tachas oyelachot. Wow, that's huge. Even minugas that was removed, and now oil. It was brought into any oil, and it was left there. Remember, we learned yesterday about an adam walking under a tree. If I'm walking under a tree. If an adam is walking, he won't impart tumah. But if the adam stands under the tree, same thing over here. That's the pshar hun chashan. Once it's placed there, nitma kol asher ba'oil. By tumas meis, it's not that way, guys. By tumas meis, I don't care if the kazai's Sarah mace or any other part of the mace that's matama ba'oil is moving. Here, it has to be stationary. Yes, nitma, because the tumah is stationary. But if the person who's tired is standing, he's stationary. Then loitima, mamish, like we learned before by other. But the moment the guy holding the Evan Hamanugas placed the Evan down, it has to do with the Evan. If it's stationary or moving, then Timahu. Why? Because of this Chumrah unique by Tzoras, Shemoishav Hamanuga. Moishav means the area where the item that's Manuga is sitting, is stationary, will become Moyu, Bein Adam, Bein Kalim, Bein Avadim, Be'etzav Afarai. Halachadal. It's not completely like Tomasoya. Yeah, a house over a house. I got that. But if I'm going to remember, we learned by Tumas Mace, if a person puts his hand over a Kazais Mace and he puts his hand over something else, he'll become the oil. That we don't say over here. Hamayel b'yodi al Evan Minugas. Or the Evan Hamunugas was over the person. It's stationary over the person. If a guy walks in backwards, interesting. So if any part of him is not yet in there, what's any part of him? That only the tip of the nose is still beyond the mashkoif. When it says habala bais, in contrast, if you're walking in like a mensch, straight, then itma. In other words, if you're entering the regular way, it's not sticking in your finger. By Tumas Mace, we learned if I stuck my finger in, I'm already tummy. Here not. But here, if the roiv of me entered, then I will become tummy. If I'm walking in backwards, it has to be all of me. You don't say asvos roiv. There you say asholish al sholish nitmeis. That even if you only put in the open ear space of the klicheres, it's a huge keli. But it doesn't matter. It's matana from the inside. The inside is under the lintel. Then nitma. Abel shara kelim, like by an adam, not like a talis, not like the klicheres. Achiyachnis roiva kelim. Umi sheyachnis ruba nitma miyad. Now by kelim, there's no frontwards and backwards. That leniency is only by adam, because in Torah, Abal Abayis was speaking about a person. That these items become tamei. Let's say generally when nichnas rubam, it's only bekelim shenichnasu chalutzin, when the kelim were not being worn. I know guy who wears kelim. Yeah, begadim are called kelim, as we spoke in our intro. Very interesting halach. No, think about it. If you bring in your pants, you're carrying your pants in your hand. The roiv of your pants are in there. It's tamei. If I walk in there wearing pants, if I don't stay there for the minimum amount of time, as we'll describe, I'll become tamei. My pants won't. Abel Adam Yisrael, shenichnas lebayis menuga, v'hu lavush bibigadav. You know, it's whatever the keli is, you're wearing it kedarkoi. Garments, you're wearing it the way you wear those garments. Shoes, you wear them on your feet. Or even if we're speaking about kelim, jewelry, person has a tabas, and he's wearing it biyadav. So even though if you would have been carrying the ring in the palm of your hand, the moment roiv of the ring enters, it becomes tamei. Here won't be that way. The Adam is takatami miyad. No, be God of anything that you're wearing are tohidim. How much time do you have to wait in the house? This is otherwise known as kedei achilas pras, but there's an interesting prat. It's not just the time that it takes you to eat it; it's the time that it takes you to get into your reclining position to eat and to eat it. But eating it with lift on our guys that we already learned. A loaf of bread is a machloikas, right? Is it 8 eggs or is it 6 eggs? The Rambam always is passing that a loaf is 6. Pras is half 3. But just to know one thing, that when the Rambam is writing over here, it's the time that it takes you to eat 3 eggs with lift on. It doesn't mean more time. Interestingly, when you eat bread without anything on it, it actually takes a person more time to eat bread. When you put on the bread whatever you smear on it, it makes it quicker to eat it. But we have all these machlutz, so many different b'poil mamish, whether I think at the minimum is 4 minutes, maybe even 3 minutes, probably 4 minutes, 12 minutes. Okay, so you have to be there at the time kedei achilas pras. Shenamar, as it says, v'ashoichev babayis yechabes begodov. Now the ha'oichel babayis yechabes begodov. Now here's the problem. Now that we said v'habol abayis, if you enter the house, you become tamei. Why does a Torah b'chlal, you enter the house, you become tamei, you lay in the house, you become tamei, you eat in the house, you become tamei? Hello, if I ate in the house, it means I'm in the house. If only entering the house makes me tamei, why does a Torah have to speak about eating? It can't be. The Torah writes v'abal abayis. So in other words, it's not that you have to actually eat. The time for you to do a halachic act of achila, which is consistent throughout, kedei achilas paras, then and only then will the begadim, or let's use the words kalim, which is better, it's generic. The kalim that you are wearing will only then become tamei. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're laying, whether you're yoshev, whether you're oimei. It's about the shir. Im shok kedei le'echol shir achilas amura. Then and only then it will be gadol. Gavaldik halacha zayin. Mishenich mas l'bayis menugam. But you're not wearing your jacket by putting your hands to the sleeves. But the kelim al kseifa, you have it only over your shoulders. I don't talk the jacket on your shoulders. That's another topic. Maybe if that's the way that people wear jackets, right? It's not called carrying. But you know, you have it on you. You have it on your shoulder. You're not wearing it. Yeah. If you have your shoes in your hands, you have your rings in the palm of your hands. That's not the way you wear it. So then it's like anything else. Hu v'hein tamei miyad. Ashreinu. She'ein no matzil milatama miyad. This whole concept of it has to be there for that minimum amount of time. It's only kalim shuhu lavush v'hen. Now let's take it to the next level. That they are not susceptible to tuma b'chlau, but they are carrying kalim. Obviously, the kalim that we are referring to are kalim that belongs to a yid. We already learned that kalim also that belongs to a guy is not subject. Maybe not. Maybe this kalim even to a yid. In other words, it's not because of tumas saras, it's because tumas bia. I take it back. The kalim can even belong to them. The nichmas l'bayis hamenuga nitmu kalim miyad. In other words, wow, miyad. Look at the logic here. Because when the wearer becomes tamei, look at the opposite. There is where we say the kula. You became tamei. The Torah says that whatever you are wearing needs the minimum shear. If you don't become tamei, then you're not qualified to be someone wearing kalim. And therefore, it's as if the kalim were brought into someone's palm in a bag. And therefore, they're a tummy right away. And again, I think the kalim can belong to a guy. I take it back. The bias cannot belong to a guy. But once the house is tummy, because you know, even musgar and it's matama babiyah, then it's matama adam and kalim. Any kalim. Halachiches. Halachiches. This, by the way, this is a halachic rule. Many people misconstrue these words and they say that look how we look down. It's not about looking down. It's about these halachas are halachas. Person is standing in a blemished house, have a held cup, and only your hands are outside of your house. And we're speaking about someone who's wearing rings, just for example. So therefore, when you entered the house, the rings did not become tummy. You have to linger, let's say, the 4 minutes. But you didn't have 4 minutes, and you stuck only your hand out, and the ring is out. Nevertheless, yes, nitmu hatabois, even though the tabois are outside, because it's on you and you are in your house. Another detail, and a person only stuck his hands lebayis hamenuga. Nitmu yadav bilvad miyad. Look at this. His hands become tummy right away. The Rambam says you have to enter Roishay Verubai. There, and Allah above there, the Rambam was speaking about the entire person. Here the Rambam is speaking about your hand. Could also be, maybe, I'm saying maybe that in Allah above we're speaking about Doiraisa. L'chayda tuma of a limb, right? Only a hand, that's a tuma derabanan. But let's go by it. If you had only a hand with the ring on it in the house for achilas paras, then nitma'u taba oisav, then your rings will become impure, and if not, they remain tahoyos. That's a tumah derabana. Okay, halacha test. Kol hamatzal b'tzamid pasil. Another rule. Kol hamatzal b'tzamid pasil ba'oil hameis. Then, if the similar thing will happen, or the similar keli, we'll give you examples. Matzal mechusa b'bayis hamenuga. We allow guys one step of lesser protection to still be matzal. He'll give an example. Whatever you need at Summit Pasul, here only covering will be a good. And furthermore, The chol hamatzil, by it only being covered by oil amaze, here you don't even need it to be covered. Afilo hoyim megula b'vayis hamenuga reisa tor. The Rambam is now, and guys, our halacha test, he's going to give an application of the reisha of test and of the seifa of test. So for the reisha, what is matzil but some apostle for tumas oil that you only have to cover it? Klei cheres. And if you remember, even though the din of Summit Puzzle is written explicitly by Klei Cheres, but the Rambam made a Kal V'chomer, that all of the Kalim, notes Klei Cheres is only mitama from the inner space. And therefore, if it's Summit Puzzle, so nothing goes into the inner space, it's matzel, everything in it, avad the Kalim that can never acquire Tuma, which is Klei Avonim, Klei Gelolim, Klei Adama, that if they are Summit Puzzle, they're matzel. So let's go. Klei Cheres, Oy Klei Avonim, or Klei Adama, and Uchayoytze Behem. But over here, they were not somewhat puzzled. We learned all the details. It has to be sealed. They were not sealed, but they were covered. We allow for one step of lesser protection. They have to be covered, but they don't have to be sealed. Now, let's go to the second case of halacha test. Right, that the kol hamatzal mechusa b'oil hameis. What are we talking about? That v'haboid, v'hadus. So different storage reservoirs that are in a bias hamenuga. Now, guys, if you remember that if you have in your house, you have a pit in the ground. What did we learn? So we learned the whole idea that if you have a mechitza, any mechitza, if it's covered, if there's no opening of a peseach tefach, then the tumah doesn't go to the other environment. In other words, a boid and a dus that is filled with water. The bias that there is a mace, if it's covered, it's matzah. Here, you don't even need to have covering. But since that doesn't need the tzamid puzzle, all it needs is a kisoi, that they are matzah, everything in it, if they would only be covered. So then here, in a alpha pisha hein megulam, so the bias is megulam. And in the ground, there's a bird. And in the bird, there's water. None of it became tamei. None of the items became tummy; they remain tied.
I thought Summit Puzzle was only for Paris.
No, so the Rambam began a Perek explicitly with that, with the Kal V'chomer that we just mentioned. Now, halacha the final halacha, and this is a big siyum the Rambam is going to write. Normally, the Rambam writes, he saves divrei musar at the end of a sefer. Here, the Rambam is going to give a whole beautiful conclusion, a siyum. Even though, guys, we have a lot to learn, which is great, until we come to the end of Sefer Tahara. But let's go. Tzara'as hu shein ha'amor b'shutvas. The word tzara'as is a word that's used for many different things. It's used in partnership. What does that mean? Koilel inyanim harbe she'ein doimim zelozeh. Now that we went through all the details. Shaharei loiven oir ha'adam. It is dafke, the whiteness on the oir ha'adam, which is called soiras. And unefilas ksa sa'ar ha'roisha yazaken, l'shita saramam, even if the bald patch area is not discolored at all, that's also called soiras. Shinoi ein habegadim, the change of a color of a white garment, the change of the color of a house, no matter the color, and that's not to white, to green and to red, is also called soras. In other words, the Rambam wants to point out that soras is a very broad word, that under its umbrella you have all different types of soras which are not the same. The zeh hashinui, all of the specific changes, ha'amur, babegadim, ubabatim, Shekara'atu Torah Tzoras B'Shutvas Hashem. All of the above, says the Rambam, Einoi Mimin Hagay Shel Olam. This is not a natural occurrence. Elois Upele. It's a sign and a wonder only amongst Yidden. And all of that is Kedei Lahazira in Milashon Hara, to warn people to stay away from undesirable speech. Shamasaper B'Lashon Hara. Firstly, what would happen? The walls of one's house will change color. And that will be a warning from Hashem. If the person would repent, then Yitar Habayis. As we learned, Christ and Pedek Tezvav in the previous chapter. You know, it's even after the house was destroyed, the person still didn't do tshuva, then Mishtan and Klei Ha'or Shabbabeisa. And if you remember, when it comes to tzaras bigodim, it's not just bigodim. We learned on all leather kalim. So it begins dafka on the leather kalim. The leather kalim that are your chairs, are your beds. It's one step removed, then your begadim. Your begadim are closer to you. The Rambam is almost making it into like 4 steps. He's making it into 4 steps. Batim, clay yard, then chazaba yitaharu, then amad berishoy, achi yisarfu, and still no tshuva. Then b'shtanan abegadim shalav. Then the clothing begin to change color. Then chazaba yitaharu, then amad berishoy, achi yisarfu. Still no tshuva. Then b'shtana oiroi. Then his actual skin becomes now. The tzara becomes afflicted with tzaras, and therefore we move the lama for some lavadoi, and all of that is actually yisasek b'sichas harashoyim, which includes both leitzanos, which ultimately will lead to lashon hara. When it says, now I know we're jumping ahead. It's interesting if you open up a Chumash Devarim, Perek Chav Daled, so you have pasuk ches. Is as our Mishnah Torah. It's a repetition. The Torah begins, Yishama B'negel Tzoras. That's pasuk ches, and then the next pasuk. I think the next pasuk is another parsha, a real parsha. Pasuk tes is Zocher Eis Asher Osa Hashem Alekech L'Minyam Aderech. So what's the heckish? What's the juxtaposition to Yishama B'negel Tzoras? And remember what happened to Miriam. Hareihu Oimer. This is what Hashem is telling us. His boinanu, Zayzich Mizboinan Mo Eida LeMiriam Hanaviyah Shedibra Be'achiyah. She was older from him, Bishanim. In other words, being the older sibling gives you some permit not to speak negatively, but you're who are you to speak? You're an older sibling. And not only was she older biologically, but not only did she help raise him, but she put herself in danger. And what did she speak already? She did not speak negatively about him. That's a very important thing. Ella, she used words which expressed her misappreciating of the level of his nevius. So all she thought is that he's a navi like all the other neviim. Ella to Asa, what was her mistake? Sheishvati l'shara neviim. And not only was that not something negative, well, he was greater, but it's not that she spoke something negative, something bad. And more than that, Moshe Rabbeinu, had he heard it, would not have cared. And that's why it says, "Tak in that parsha, Moshe anav ma'od." And nevertheless, Avot became the Yad Nenshu Mitzoras, Kal v'Chomer livnei Yadam, Hodeshoyim, Hatibshim, Shamar be'ledaber G'dolos v'neflois. Interesting expression. Lefikach. Now, anyone who wants to correct herself, what should you do? The way you stay away from lashon hara is stay away from people that speak leitzonus. Lisrachek mi'shivasan milodaber imohem kidei shelo yitafes adam bereshus risham v'sechlusam. It doesn't begin straight with lashon hara. It begins with a foolish speech. And how do you help yourself? This is the Rambam L'shitasa. He's not speaking about inner work, which no matter where you're at, no, be smart, just stay away from them. That's the way it works. First of all, all it begins is when people speak too much. Speaking the Torah, Tefillah, Gamach, Kol Amarba, Mitzvah. Speaking about stam words that are empty. How do you know if someone is exil? If he's speaking unnecessary words. Now, that is step number 1. You got to speak. If you have to speak the whole time, then you have to find topics. The topics are not about inyanim, they're about people. So, then how does it begin? They begin speaking about tzaddikim. Tzaddik. Now, once people, that's the highest level. If people are comfortable to speak about the greatness of tzaddikim, and meaning, not everything they say is, and uboizem devarav umitataim beneviav l'chayda that I is the malachi elikim l'chayda is at tzaddik. And after speaking to against Malachi Elikim, then you begin mocking the Nevi'im. Next level will be, or maybe Yaakov. I think it's tzaddikim are lower than Nevi'im. I'll tell you what, because we're going. You begin speaking against tzaddikim, and then once you become familiar with that, then you can even mark Nevi'im, and then God forbid, and Davar Elikim is speaking negatively about God, and ultimately you'll be kofar beikar. Different levels there also. Ke'inyan shenemar vayechapu b'nei Yisrael devarim asher lo yichein al Hashem Elikeihem, and the al is both ledaber and then to deny. In other words, they set their mouths, Bashamayim here means against God. But why, who gave a human being a courage to speak about God? It doesn't begin that way. It begins, was first they spoke about those who are here on the earth. And it didn't even begin to speak against the tzaddikim. It begins by speaking divrei havoy. And all of that, zuhi, sicha, sarashoyim, the ulashoyim tahalach ba'aretz. Shegoyremes lahem yeshivas karanis, the yeshivas knesiyah shalami aretz, the yeshivas batim mishtoyim shoyse sheichar. Avol sichas ksheri Yisrael v'tzadikayim eina ela b'divrei Torah v'chachman. He's not speaking. He's not saying don't live a life of silence. No, use the koyach hadibur, but use it for divrei Torah and divrei chachma. And once you're speaking about concepts and Torah and chachma, you'll never get there. But fikach hakadosh baruch hu oizer al yodan umezaka oisan ba shenemar. In other words, if you're punished for speaking negative words, that there's a special siyata d'shmai that you're given when you make the effort to speak divrei Torah and chachma. Oz nidberu yirei Hashem ishal reyeyu. And what happens? Hashem takes note of this positive trait. Vayakshev Hashem vayishma. And by Yekosev Sefer Zekaron Lefano, L'yirei Hashem Olochosh V'Shemay, the fact that you are recorded, that in itself will stand in your stead. And with that we say, B'rich Rachmana D'Sayon, and God willing, tomorrow Shabbos Kodesh, we're going from great to even greater. We're going to start Hilchais Matama Mishkov U'Moishav. Looking forward.
Quick question. Wait, does the Tumot Saras start with the house and then spread to the person?
That's what the Rambam writes. Did it always happen that way? I don't know. Doesn't mean it always needed to happen that way.
Because the order is
sometimes a person had a schus avos and it protected him until it ran out, and then boom, they get him right away. I don't know how it works. Okay. At the beginning. Yeah, get the yoke. Yeah. Bismillah Yasov, Kina Yasov, everybody lay. Beautiful, beautiful.